Welcome to Talkin Tires, the podcast that delves deep into the world of tires. Join us as we explore everything from the science behind the manufacturing to the latest innovations in tire recycling. Our aim is to provide you with a comprehensive understanding of tires, including how they work, how to maintain them, and how to dispose of them responsibly. Whether you're a seasoned mechanic, curious car enthusiast, or an avid recycler, Talkin Tires is the perfect podcast for anyone who wants to learn about the essential component of the modern vehicle and heavy equipment. So buckle up and join us for an informative and engaging journey into the world of tires. All right, welcome to another episode of Talkin Tires. I'm here with my dad, Bill Hunter. Now, Bill Hunter has had a lot of companies over the years, so I can't just throw out a name of a company and a title and you might recognize the name or the company name, because there's been many over the years, but that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because for some reason I've had an entrepreneur blood, and it's been from just a little tyke, and that had to start somewhere. And I mean, this is a podcast about tires and Talkin Tires, and what I hope people understand when we talk about this is that really you can insert anything into any industry, and it's really about the tenacity and the drive, the ability to innovate and why one innovates. But starting with you, I feel like for business, we almost have to go back to childhood. I mean, I guess we should start with, there's gonna be some viewers from back home, so we'll share this with friends and family. So you come from my grandma and grandpa, Doris May and Cecil Hunter in Bakersfield, California. Your sisters were Joyce and Glenda, right? And it was just the three of you.
Yep.
Raised right there in Bakersfield, California. And why don't you start there? Because I know it, and obviously this is going to relatively tie into business, but it's personal too. It's a podcast, so it's literally just about everything. And just for me, it had to start somewhere. And I know it was Grandpa was an entrepreneur, right? So start there.
I would say it all started in the Dust Bowl. And the migration from Oklahoma to California by my mom and dad and my sisters.
And you were in Grandma's tummy at that time, right?
No. Matter of fact, they were so broke and so desperate, just losing their farm, so having to start all over.
I'm going to go back. So this is like that movie or book, The Grapes of Wrath. So they moved from Dust Bowl, everybody's farms dried up, which we couldn't even imagine that around here because we have God's country, which I'll explain where we're at in a minute and why we're here. But that just the idea of everything just literally poofed back then.
Just went away. And as it turned out, after studies were run, that it was mostly not only a weather event, but a soil conditioning event, because they didn't know to reclaim, they didn't know to rotate their crops to protect their soil from blowing away. So when the perfect storm hit, that's what wiped everybody out, and
that's going to tie in later too,
hooks back in, yeah. Okay. Because as we moved to California, my dad got a job as a farmer, farm manager, and at first when they got there, they were picking fruit in the fields. My mom and my dad and my sisters lived in a tent in Shafter, California, and picked fruit.
Sounds familiar, right? I mean, it sounds like a lot of the migrant stories you're hearing right now.
It's the same scenario. They were just trying to find a new place to live, and
they caught a lot of flack there in Bakersfield when they showed up.
There were signs, Okies go home, there's no jobs here, and just, all of that type of discrimination that people do.
Yeah.
And did a lot more in the
so he probably had
late 30s, early 40s.
Had an ass full of that and was ready to own his own company, right? So
well, what started, the way it worked out, he finally got a job managing a ranch that was just bare land, the very tip of the southern San Joaquin Valley, where the valley hits the mountains. That was all desert at that time. And a man hired my dad to break all that soil in and plow up all the cactus and sagebrush and tumbleweeds. And they hired him because, being from Oklahoma, he was a cotton farmer. So they put cotton in for the first first time, and then eventually they
So that was a new crop in Bakersfield when you
no,
grew up
not
up there?
necessarily, but weren't that many cotton growers that knew how to grow cotton in that hot of weather, and lack of water. Plus, good old Okie determination, to go in and break out soil and kill rattlesnakes by the pickup loads and things like that. They had to clear the land. So it was a lot of work. So he was right. It was perfect for him. And what got him going in business for himself in California was the fact that back then all fertilizers were handled in bags, 80-pound sacks. And my dad, during planting season, would take the company's flatbed pickup or truck and go to town and get a load of fertilizer and a load of potato seed and come back to the farm, and they'd plant the potatoes. And then when they would do that, then when they got through, the other farmers in the area would say, "Hey, Cecil, when you get through hauling yours, could you haul mine?" And so my dad said he took his hat in hand and went to Bank of America and asked for a loan. And they gave him
the
a shot.
risk, right? That's
Yeah,
where it
that's
comes.
where
That's when you
risk capital. And he bought an old Chevy flatbed 2-axle truck, gasoline, and that was the beginning of Cecil Hunter Trucking. And
so is that where you got your first set of keys?
well, yeah, at about 12, 13 years old. Back then, the law wasn't what it is today, so
Right.
I was driving, hauling fertilizer and potatoes when I was in my teens, early teens. And then my dad and my mother and my grandfather got in the grocery store business.
Right, that's the Lancaster side.
That's the Lancaster side. And they had that for several years until we moved out into the country. Then we sold the store. My mom and dad sold their interest in the grocery stores. And we moved out into the country and went strictly in trucking. And then on my 15th birthday, my dad brought home 2 wrecked trucks. Brought home a 1962 wrecked Peterbilt that the front end had been smashed. And we had a 1950 auto car. And my dad told me if I could take the engine and transmission out of the Peterbilt and put it in the and put it in the good 1950 auto car, that he would give me the pink slip. So
I think about those kind of things like that scenario because Brett Eckhart and I are always talking about our kids and how easily it would be to just give them whatever they want, right? Because Grandpa could have easily just paid someone to put a motor in, right? And it might even have been cheaper.
Like we had a whole yard full of trucks at that time.
Yeah, so there's something about...
I had to do it by myself. I couldn't have anybody help me.
So it was like a proof, almost, or like earn your stripes.
I had to pay my dues.
Earn it. There you go.
And learn.
So then did you start making money with that truck? Is that where it all started?
He said all I had to do was drive it around the house, and he would give me the pink slip, and I did. And he said, okay, go out there and hook onto that set of trailers and go get a load of rice. And I went and hauled rice all summer long. And I started my sophomore year in high school with a new car, a new motorcycle, and my own truck. So that started me in the trucking company. And then later on...
Was that your summer gig then?
That was my
because you
summer
played all
gig.
sports, so...
So
you had to go
it was
summer.
all summertime, and fertilizer season was in the fall, but I was playing football or whatever then, so I couldn't do that.
But then all that ended, so now you graduate in high school and you got a truck already, so you just go right to trucking?
And then I had you and your brother and a next investment. So we had a friend of ours that was in the fertilizer spreading application with the flotation tires and all that. And my dad was intrigued by it, and he's seen how that guy was distributing a lot of the material we were hauling, the fertilizer business. So he wanted me to learn how to run an applicator on my own. So I took a job with him during the winter, And
Oh, with the guy who's already doing it.
yeah,
Okay, that sounds familiar because we do a lot. I mean, when we see
Same.
something we want to do, we usually try to find a friend
Find
out of the
somebody-
market that's already doing it or something. Yeah.
that's why my dad picked him, because he knew what he was doing. You know, his name was Donnie something. Anyway, he and at the end of that, he offered me and my dad a spreader that he wanted to get rid of, a 1970 International. And so my dad and I swung it, and we bought it, and he gave us a job. And our first job was putting in fertilizer ahead of almond tree orchard, or no, I'm sorry, a pistachio tree orchard for a company called Tri Farms. And the owners were, and for you old guys will know this, it was Bob Hope, Lucille Ball, and Vice President Spiro Agnew. And so that was our first spreading job, and we did it. And when we got through, after a new engine in the spreader and the new tires on the spreader, we split $22,000
After everything.
after everything was done. And I told my dad I want to get in the spreading business. So in 1975, I bought a new diesel truck.
With a 1-year-old. My brother was
My
born
Mac,
in 74.
yep.
Yeah.
And then in 1978, I bought a brand new spreader truck. And I bought another one in 1985. And two more in 1986.
So that's Hunter. That's where Hunter
That was Cecil
spreading.
Hunter's son.
Oh, okay.
First
So
it
it's still combined.
Well, you know, I was still flying low, so I had to have an investor or a backer just like everybody does.
Right.
And that just happened to be my dad.
So is Cecil Hunter trucking and spreading? Was
And
that?
then it changed. No, it changed. It went from Cecil Hunter Trucking to Cecil Hunter and Son Trucking. Then it went to Cecil Hunter and Son Trucking and Spreading. And then my dad retired, and then I sold the trucks and invested the money in spreaders, and it went to straight Hunter Spreading.
Right. And that's what I'm familiar
And
with.
that's
where
where
I
you
grew
came
up
into the game.
my-
You were old enough
to
to
understand what that was.
and ride the three-wheelers and
So
bag the wheels.
that's perfect, because that brings us to why we're sitting right where we're at. So just so everybody knows, I'm driving from Boise to my dad's side of the state near Pocatello after a nice Memorial weekend with the big
Absolutely.
family all living here in Idaho now. Those were stories we were just telling were from California. So now we're on our way back across, and I couldn't help but stop where we first
back.
landed when we came from California to Idaho. And you had
And
those
it-
spreader rigs, and you had payments to make. So how did we get to Idaho?
Well, in 1984, when I bought my first boom truck, I actually demoed my first boom truck. Being from California, most of the fields in California are small. They're 40, 60,
It's square.
80 acres, surrounded by oil wells, soccer moms, stray dogs, you name it, they're running everywhere. So you didn't have much room to maneuver something with 60 foot of booms.
The fertilizer
The
applicators.
fertilizer applicators. So if I was going to step in from the fan spreaders to the boom spreaders, I felt like I needed some training again. So I went to the source and I researched Idaho and American Falls, where we're sitting right now. At that time was the highest amount of millionaires per capita in the state. So I had the machine delivered here. And I went to J.R. Simplot and negotiated a contract from the 1st of March till the 30th of May for 5 years. And then we bought another one. And
So that's, and I know this, but just so everybody else understands, so that's taking your equipment that you utilized in one season in Southern California, and you could transport it on flatbed. No, we
I
drove
drove them.
You drove those big flotation spreaders all the way up to right here, American Falls.
$1,000.
Used them for that March 1st to May
Back.
30th, and then went back and worked another season. So then you had a double season.
Yeah, well, California started Thanksgiving Day, and it ended
Which
around.
we might have a foot of snow Thanksgiving
Oh,
Day here.
absolutely.
I got you.
Absolutely.
Okay, now that
And then
makes sense.
plant. So then I would take a month or so to service, for me and you to go skiing and have a little off time.
Yep.
And then we came to Idaho, spread through to May, And then we went home and played baseball for the summer and serviced the equipment, ran the trucks.
Okay, now it's been
And then we bought the deli.
Yeah, that was fun too.
Yeah.
So that was diversification was part of your game early on. Even as a spreader operator, you had other businesses, rentals, and business. That was a deli. Did it have gas? It seemed like it had gas.
No, we
but
didn't
you
have
ripped it
gas.
out.
We took the tanks out.
Yes, but it was like a little mart
It
deli
was
thing.
a mart, and then I had a check cashing business on the side of
Oh,
that.
that's right.
So I did payroll for the local farmers. For that.
Yeah.
That was a good thing.
So that's all the sunshiny story. So something happened in California to get us up here. There was a drought of.
Well, the compost.
So we moved from California to Bakersfield. What happened?
Well, in I think it was '75, a guy gave me a book called Black Gold, and it was a paperback, and it was about compost and what compost does for the soil and how it can change the structure of soil, and that all went back to my dad telling me about how the farmers hurt all the soil by not putting any organic material in it.
Right. So that was earlier when we were talking about
Right,
the Dust Bowl.
to go back. So that kept on me, and every time we go fishing, my grandpa and my dad would tell me take the guts from all the fish and plant and dig a hole and put them around the tree trunks because they would break down and fertilize the trees. Well, this is knowledge that they don't teach in school.
The old timers.
As old school guys. And when I saw the compost, I thought, well, this is a way that we could do this on a commercial level. So I studied it, and I read the book front to back, and learned. It taught you how to build a compost jar, and how to temperature gauge it, moisture gauge it, and all that. So I learned how to make compost. So I started the composting business, and I divided the fertilizer into a chemical division and an organic division. And that's California. The organic started.
This is late '80s. This is before anybody was talking organics or
early late
recycling
'70s
or any of that.
In 1981, I bought the Big A 4500 spreader, which would carry about 11 tons of compost, and that opened up the application end of it. And I already had the commercial end of it, and I had the trucking part of it. So I just about had it all tied up. So all it was educating the farmers to do the organics.
Right. So now you're up here in American Falls and you're spreading commercial fertilizer for a 5-year contract for J.R. Simplot, right?
Right.
And compost comes up. Tell me about that story.
Well, the best one was there was a guy right across the street, and his field was so dusty and powdery that I told him, I said, well, why don't you take some of that dairy manure you got over there with all them cows and put it on this field? And he goes, well, why would I put that trash on my fields? He said, I do everything I can to keep that out of my fields. So I started talking to more and more guys, and then J.R. Simplot sent a lawyer to me and told me to cease, to never speak organics if I was going to spread commercial fertilizer. I needed to shut that off. And being under a 5-year contract, I shut it off. And so it took that many years for you boys to get old enough to where I could jerk roots and move here, because I felt like here was more opportunity than California. California had taken off.
Right.
Remember, I had the Handles and all the other spreader companies were starting to do it.
Yeah.
And Hargis opened up the compost yard. Then the city of Los Angeles started bringing all their waste into Kern County and turning it into compost. So I figured I'd rode that horse as far as it was going to run.
Right.
So,
And up here, not only were they not talking about it, you had the local commercial fertilizer producer telling you to not talk about it.
And anytime somebody tells me not to do something, there's a reason.
That's what I'm after. That's that. And so you knew you were onto something.
I knew I'd hit a vein, but I was competing against a powerful organization. So I just had to bite the bullet. I had to eat some bologna and get by until I could convince enough people to try it. And
so then that started, and again, back into you're living here now in Idaho in the part of this story, and you've decided that compost is the future for Idaho in your mind, or at least the future for a commercially sustainable compost facility that makes compost and goes out on big fields for large acreage, not just all these little pockets of compost here and there, like something that could do it as a major company.
Make an impact.
Yeah, they could actually do something.
Well, here you got fields of 320, 640. I mean, you got
acres.
You got some acreage that you
Right.
could deal with, and not only that, and this is maybe the emotional side of it, or something. I would say what drives a businessman to succeed. He has to have something in his heart that he's doing the right thing.
Yes.
And with the compost, when I figured the millions of pounds and tons of chemicals that I had dumped on the soil for so many years to make a living, then when I realized that compost could literally heal that damage, I felt that was the driving thing more than the money. And then one just follows the other.
Your why.
Your why. So, and I mean, I had my ups and downs. I've had my, guys that said it would never work.
Yeah.
And some of those guys now that told me it wouldn't work do it all the time.
Yeah. And we just drove across the state, and I mean, I'm gonna give you credit whether you deserve it or whether other people think you deserve it, but I think you deserve credit that there's a pile of compost at just about every pivot corner from there to here.
There was none when we got here.
And
let me tell the Simplot story.
all right.
The last year I worked for J.R. Simplot, he sent me to Pasco, Washington to do his private farm. And it's just huge farm right along the Columbia River. And at the bottom of the main gate going in was a feedlot. And I drove right through that feedlot every day, and spread chemical fertilizers on JR's land. And then one night I got held up there waiting for a truck to deliver. Imagine that, waiting on a truck to deliver. But anyway, it was late when he showed up. Well, when the lights all went out, when the sun went down, all of a sudden I seen down at the feedlot lights fire up on equipment moving all over the place. And pretty soon, sure enough, there was about 10 manure spreaders hauling manure right up that road and spreading on JR's private farm. This is the guy that told me to never mention organic fertilizer. And on his front gate there's a sign as big as a bus that says, J.R. Simplot, the most productive farm on the planet. And I thought right then, man, what a jerk.
Yeah. Well,
he's a businessman.
it is. It is business, and him and his wife's names are on buildings at my son's college. Caldwell.
Well, I give him credit where credit's due.
Yeah, they got onto something early, but sometimes I often wonder, and I've shared this too, is what might have happened if when that lawyer came out to told you to cease and desist talking organic technology, if they might have invited you into the office and said, what are you talking about? Like, teach us this, show us that. Like, what do you? But instead, I don't know if it's ego or just fear, maybe fear holding you down, like fear. But then they did that probably for a couple decades, because every time we'd go out here and knock on a door in Aberdeen or American Falls, we would hear negative connotation after negative thing about compost that we knew wasn't true, and we knew that the weed seeds would cook in the process and die, and the pathogens too, and that everything that they said negative about it was somebody saying that compost is gaining steam, we got to stop that. But here we are. So I think kind of the cherry on top was we get to do this podcast together, but we also got to work together. At the end of my sales career and going into promoting Tire Reclaim and becoming the president of Tire Reclaim, we got to start a compost company, Legacy Compost, and we jumped from just a few truckloads to hundreds of truckloads annually, seemingly overnight with that company. The demand was there, the ideas were there. It just took all of your ideas and my corporate background to put some spreadsheets and get some things together and make that happen. Absolutely. And then the relationships you had already built. I didn't have to go find customers. I didn't have to go find even the suppliers. If you remember, Interstate Feeders was an open door. You and I just walked right in and told them, hey, this is our plan. I wouldn't have had that meeting without you. You know what I mean? Yeah, so it had to like come together at a moment. And then now I sold that company to have our company, the Tire Reclaim now, that has bred all of this success that allows for a camera crew and people to help us, you know. So the success has come full circle.
And the Tire Reclaim is recycling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And manure is just manure until you process it. Then it's a product that you can distribute and make a living from, not only at the same time serving your fellow man and cleaning the planet up. So you get everybody on board once they learn that it's good for everybody.
Right, and it's good business. It's good money. And I can say that like as an open statement about both industries. That's because they were trash, right? Yeah. The one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Right. It's a perfect example. Is when I first started, they used to pay me to clean the manure out of their dairies.
Right.
Then they went to, well, we'll just give it to you, Bill. And then another year later, well, we need a couple of bucks for that, Bill. And so...
Well, I'm sad to say that I think that's probably where tires will end up. We talk about it. I really do. I think tires are going to end up being the aluminum can of the waste industry because but we're talking, it could be a decade, it could be two decades, it could be 2 years. But what I'm getting at is just what you're saying because Brett saw it in the metals industry because with the appliances and stuff, you used to take them and drop them off and they charge you to get rid of your old refrigerator or this or that. Now you go there, as long as the Freon's cleaned out of it, but you take it there, they pay you for the metal scrap, right? Recycling. Right. So I think that day's coming, and without men like you pioneering and doing those, you know, like I said, you didn't have to build that truck that Grandpa wanted you to put a motor in. You didn't have to go and learn how to put down fertilizer and then make it into a 6 or 7 spreader fleet. You know, you didn't have to do any of that. You were literally doing that, I'm sure, to make money, right? But also to grow and to be a part of something, to change. And that's really, I thought that's why this was a perfect opportunity to have a podcast, because whether it's about tires or manure or, you know, this coffee cup, it's about, you know, somebody having the gumption to get up every morning and try.
And whether you get knocked down, and some people don't get up, some people get up running.
Yeah.
And so you know, you can't give up. I mean, JR ran me out of here in 89, and we didn't get back here until 96. So we lost a considerable amount of time here. But, you know, that, like I said, that's just, that was just business. Yeah. And as you get older, you learn that. You learn
now you're retired.
It's just right now I'm retired.
Sit on the ranch, come and visit the grandkids when you want to.
That's it.
That's what a man told me one time: is being rich is being able to do whatever you want to, when you want to.
Then I'm very rich. I don't even do anything, you know, other than I still peddle a little hay once in a while, you know. Yeah. Still got a little livestock.
Well, which that should, I mean, always 208, 409, 2009. That's my dad's number. Any hay for sale or that you need to buy, this is the guy to call. We're talking feeder hay and alfalfa hay. Yeah.
Well, you know, I got 836 phone numbers in my book.
Well, some of them might ring after this.
It's all about making connections, holding those connections, fortifying those connections, and not forgetting even the littlest guy. You know, even if, in my book, if a guy had 20 acres or if he had 2,000 acres, if he called and asked for help, I give it to him. Because it's not always about the money, but it is. And that 20-acre guy might inherit 2,000 acres next week.
Right.
And you treated him the same as you did a big guy, he's going to call you first. So yeah, I always felt like you should treat every customer as if they're just as important as the next. Shake a hand, pat a back.
That's a good one to end on. Appreciate you sitting with me,
Thanks,
Dad.
son.